live stream us. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. We're here tonight to discuss the disposal of land at Lansdowne South, or the former Richmond Elementary School, to Victoria Hospice. And this is a land disposal consultation kickoff, and we will provide you with some information tonight so that you can give us some feedback. I want to start off with the acknowledgement of the traditional territories. The Greater Victoria School District wishes to recognize and acknowledge the Esquimalt and Songhees nations on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. I'd like to do a few introductions, and I tried to keep an eye on the participants as they were entering. So I think I see Trustee Angie Hensa, Trustee Chair Ann Whitaker, and Trustee Nicole Duncan. If there are others, I can't see you because I'm presenting, and I hope you can speak up if you're here. In terms of senior staff, my name is Kim Morris. I'm the Secretary Treasurer for the school district. With us tonight, I believe we have Interim Superintendent Deb Whitten, Deputy or Interim Deputy Superintendent Colin Roberts, Associate Superintendent Harold Caldwell, Communications Manager Lisa McPhail, my co-presenter Chuck Morris, Director of Facilities, and Andy Canty, our Director of Information Technology for Learning. And I am sorry if I did not see any other staff. Please speak up if you are here and I didn't mention your name. Thank you. And in terms of Victoria Hospice Society, we'd like to welcome to our meeting tonight Paul Palin, Board Chair, Kevin Harder, CEO, and Jen Cooper, the Victoria Hospice Society Communications Coordinator. And again, if I've missed anybody from Victoria Hospice, I hope you'll let us know. And I'm not sure we have any municipal partners tonight. I didn't notice any on the participants as they were coming in, but if they are here, welcome as well. So just a quick overview of the land disposal proposal. And that is a land sale from SD 61 to Victoria Hospice Society and at the Lansdowne Middle School South Campus. And this is the former Richmond Elementary School. And at this campus, we have approximately 233 grade 6 students attending at the Lansdowne South Campus. The proposal contemplates selling 1.9 acres of the 8-acre parcel for $2.5 million. The purpose of this deal is for SD 61 to build its capital reserves for future capital upgrades, and for Vic Hospice for continuation and improvement of community service in their realm. And just a reminder, a sale of lands between a public school district and a third party does require ministry approval. A little bit of the background. Vic Hospice approached School District 61 about the parcel as it looked to relocate and expand. The board discussed putting the parcel on the open market or coming forward with a partner, and decided to come forward with a partner. SD 61 and Vic Hospice entered into a purchase and sale agreement, and the district's subject tos are 3 readings of a board disposal bylaw and Ministry of Education approval. And part of the Ministry of Education's approval is that we must demonstrate that we've consulted. And so we also have policy around consultation. So that's why we're here tonight, to make sure that we are informing you and so that you can let us or let the board know what you think about this particular proposal. So it's important to remember that while an agreement's been signed, there are still 2 major steps to finalize the deal from SD 61's perspective, or our part of the deal. Here's a visual for you in terms of the South Lansdowne site. And if you walked by the property, you would have seen a sign on the fence that looks like this. So the entire parcel is 8 acres, and the proposed yellow parcel is the 1.9 acres proposed to be sold. And again, in this area, about 233 students attend grade 6. Sometimes when we do a consultation around a land disposal, people want to see comparisons of the size of the property that we are talking about and how it compares to other schools. So this is a series of slides that we like to present. This particular slide represents the number of acres by school, and we'll be looking mainly at this column right now. And for those acres, from the largest parcel we have to the smallest parcel in terms of middle schools. And Lansdowne North, after the CSF disposal, is still our largest middle school property. And here down below, you can see where Lansdowne South, former Richmond, sits at 8 acres in comparison to other middle schools. But it's important to remember that the two of these combined are our middle school. We also start to talk a little bit about students per acre. And this is information sometimes people like to compare as well. And so in this slide, we're going to be looking at this column. And I should say the slide before this one and this one are before the disposal of the 1.9 acres. So we try to take a look at how many students are there per acre. And this particular statistic is working from smallest to largest. So Rock Heights with 215 students on 8.2 acres has the lowest students per acre at 26.38. And then you can see Lansdowne North and Lansdowne South after that. So what we're trying to just demonstrate here is that it is one of the lower students per acre sites that we have. And then once the proposal is presented to the public, and if it goes through, we also like to talk about what that means in terms of post-disposal acres. And so again, once we talk about the disposal, we see our middle schools here in terms of acreage from largest to smallest. Of course, Lansdowne's unimpacted here, or sorry, Lansdowne North. And so it sits, it remains at 17.9, and the change here is the former Richmond Elementary or Lansdowne South goes down to 6.1 acres. And then again, we like to look after the proposal went through, if it was approved, we like to look at students per acre. And again, we see Lansdowne North with the second smallest, and we see Lansdowne South with 38.2 students per acre. So right around the middle of what the rest of our middle schools are experiencing. So that's just some area data for you. We're going to talk a little bit about enrollment and capacity in the next few slides. Oops. In terms of enrollment at Lansdowne Middle School itself, and this is the entire middle school, so the North and South campus. In red, we can see the capacity of the school. And in September 2020, we did open the South Campus at Richmond, and that's why you see a big increase from 2019 to 2020, because we added that extra space. And in terms of the enrollment, working with our 2 consultants that we use for enrollment projections, we can see what we expect Lansdowne Middle School enrollment to do over the next few years. And so we can see with the difference between the red and the blue, there is room at the site for enrollment growth if it should grow, but we are trending downward over time. And in terms of the family of schools in which Lansdowne Middle School resides, we talk about the Victoria High School family of schools. And again, we can see the capacity in red, and we can see the increase here with the opening of Lansdowne. And we can look to 22, 23 to see the added seats at Victoria High School increases the family of school capacity. We can also see in blue the enrollment for the groupings of schools that feed into the Victoria High School family. And again, some small increases and then trending downward afterwards. So again, we see within the family of schools, so surrounding schools and the high school itself, as a family, we see room between the red and the blue in terms of if there was enrollment growth, we would have capacity to meet it. The proceeds of this disposal are $2.5 million if approved. 25% would go into local capital, or about $625,000, and 75% would go into shareable capital, or about $1.875 million. And proceeds from any land sale go toward partially funding future capital upgrades or new construction for School District 61 schools. When we talk about local and shareable capital, here's just a little bit of an indicator of what the difference is between those two. The local capital we tend to use for some of our smaller capital, so purchase of land, buildings, vehicles, furniture and equipment, computer hardware and software over $5,000 each. Our general use is minor or major renovation to buildings, purchase of computer hardware and software, furniture and equipment and vehicles. Generally, when we have a sale of land that the ministry helped us buy to build a school, the sharing is 25-75, so local capital is 25%. And if we had any money in reserves under local capital, we would need a board motion to be able to spend it. Staff cannot decide to build a childcare studio or add a portable to a site or to renovate a bathroom with local capital without a board motion. And we have no ability to spend either local capital or shared capital on operating expenses like heat and light, teacher and education assistant salaries, etc. So there are definitely two different pots of money. And on the shared capital side, these are for our bigger capital projects or bigger capital purchases. And they are used for land acquisition, major capital upgrades, especially where we use or choose a more expensive option than the ministry suggests. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in another slide. Again, the proceeds here are 75% into a shared capital account. It doesn't mean the money goes to any other district. It's just shared with the ministry in terms of the trigger to spend is not only a board motion, but also ministry approval. So if we wanted to spend that $1.8 million that was on the previous slide, we would need the board to make a motion to request the ministry approve this expenditure. And again, we have no ability to spend either of these funds on operating expenses like staffing and day-to-day operations of the school district. Each year, the district and all 60 school districts in the province put in their 5-year capital plans for major capital projects and minor capital projects. And some are approved and some are not. Usually when a major capital project is approved, there's an expectation from the ministry that the district will contribute some of the capital toward that project, especially when the district or the board chooses to take on a more expensive project. And we've got a couple of examples here for you. So the Vic High seismic upgrade and expansion would have been cheaper if we had not maintained the heritage status and the facade and the elements of that building. And it would have been cheaper to build a new building. And so the ministry asked the district to contribute 2.6, and the district is doing that. Quite the opposite at Cedar Hill Middle School, the seismic upgrade was the cheaper option, but at $45 million, the board was interested in a school seismic replacement, which means a new building. And so the new building was more expensive than the upgrade, and by $3.6 million. And the board was asked if it would like to contribute that to get a replacement school rather than an upgrade, and it did. The other major capital cost that we're starting to look at is carbon neutrality. We know in June 2019, the board passed its climate emergency motion. And we know that Clean BC has a government buildings program aiming for 2032, and that we're to be building our buildings as carbon neutral ready for 2032. And as the board looks toward Cedar Hill Middle School, we are wondering if, we should be building it to a more neutral than net zero ready. And so we're wondering if it should be net zero now. And we're starting to pursue that with our architect. And so if that were the case, since the ministry's program funds net zero ready for 2032, if we wanted to be more neutral or more ahead of the game in terms of that carbon neutrality, there would be an additional investment that the board would have to make at its own cost. So it's another example of a capital cost that may come to the board's decision. In terms of enrollment, we know in 2018, there was a huge boundary review. There was increasing enrollment and capacity pressure in terms of room for students. At that time, there was a realignment of boundaries and a rebalancing of school populations in order to provide additional spaces and to sort of smooth out some of the enrollment pressures that we were feeling in the district. In terms of Victoria Hospice Society, they provided quality end-of-life care for over 40 years. The demand for their services is growing. And this project, if approved, would allow them to expand services like grief support, community education, and practical programs for people on their end-of-life journey. Victoria Hospice also has to adapt and expand to the changes in its community to try to meet the needs. And this agreement would be an important step in realizing their strategic goals. When we talk about capital planning, what principles do we keep in mind as we carry on with our planning and our resource allocation? Safety is number one. Enrollment and capacity. Is there enough room for the students to attend and future students to attend? What is the condition of the existing building, and does it need to change in a drastic way through an upgrade or a replacement? We know that climate is looming. We've experienced some extreme weather, and we know we have some board motions that we are to attend to. Learning environments. We want to create the best learning opportunities for students. And if we think about the learning environment as one of the elements of those conducive learning opportunities, then we need to think about what kinds of learning environments we're giving our students to learn in. We have to be mindful of what kind of funding we have and the different categories that we have available. So is it major capital, minor capital? Is it an element of the building like windows or the boiler? Or is it the entire building envelope in terms of age and end of useful life? And we also have to think about student transportation. Where are we building our schools? And how far away are the students that we're hoping will attend these schools? So when we talk about safety as one of our capital planning principles, seismic program is at the top of our list. BC Seismic Mitigation Program, in terms of our school district, all our schools were assessed in 2018, and 15 schools in our district are still H1. And H1 is the highest risk, most vulnerable, highest risk of widespread damage or structural failure, not repairable after the event, and there are structural and non-structural seismic upgrades required. And we can see below here the range of seismic assessment, and we have 15 schools in the high 1 area. As well as seismic, when we start to talk about conditions of the building and those learning environments, we know in terms of deferred maintenance, we have aging infrastructure, and we know deferred maintenance is a factor in our facility condition index. And we're going to talk about FCI in a slide or two. Deferred maintenance represents the cost or the estimated cost of all future repairs and system replacement and when those should occur. We use deferred maintenance for capital planning, and we use it for budgeting our annual maintenance. All ST61 buildings are audited on a 3 to 5 year cycle, as are all buildings in the province in all school districts. And the Ministry of Education contractor performs these audits. So when we take a look at deferred maintenance in School District 61, we try to look at the priority of the deferred maintenance given our data. And so priority on the left-hand side here is immediate, short-term, long-term recommended up to building code and non-structural seismic is about $278 million. And you can see long-term here is about 243 million. Short term is a cool 15 million, and immediate is a $2 million amount. So it starts to demonstrate the type of dollar figure or impact we are looking at in terms of our future maintenance costs. And when we're looking at the long term, how are we going to attend to these? And also our data shows us what kind of category our deferred maintenance is. And so we can see in the big blue piece of the pie here, this is our beyond useful life. So these are our aging infrastructure. We have a lot of buildings, some with some good maintenance and some with some challenging maintenance and systems that need replacing. So all of our systems, the majority of our systems are aging and will require replacement in the mid to long term. And then you can see some of the other breakdowns there in terms of what the deferred maintenance is made up of. But the biggest one is beyond useful life. So when we talk about Facility Condition Index, or FCI, again, we're audited on a 3 to 5 year rotating cycle. And FCI determines our condition. And it's a mathematical formula of our deferred maintenance over replacement cost. And the lower FCI, the better the condition. So if we only had $5,000 in deferred maintenance and the replacement of a building was $100,000, our FCI would be quite low. And we would think that is a building in better condition. We use FCI in these types of presentations and lots of decision making, especially our district capital and budget planning. When we talk about a range, or what do these ranges mean in terms of condition? And I apologize, some of the FCIs in this presentation are percentages and some are 2 decimals. So we will try to improve that in the future, but they represent the same thing. So 0 to 5% or 0.05 is a building that's in excellent condition. And we can go down to the very bottom of the scale and look at 0.6 or 60% and above. Means the condition of the building is very poor. And so when we look at a 60%, we would be looking at deferred maintenance of, let's say in that last example, of $60,000 and only $100,000 to replace the entire building. The business case starts to be more in the range of replacing that building, but it's still a big capital cost, whether you're attending to the deferred maintenance or asking the ministry for a major capital project. And so here's a list of our schools that currently, as of the database last week, that are over 0.5. So these are buildings in our school district that are greater than 50% FCI. And if we keep this range in mind, we can see that 30 to 60 is poor and 60 and above is very poor. And so we can see our latest announcement from the ministry is the Cedar Hill Middle School replacement, and you can start to see why with that business case with an FCI of 76%. And you can start to see other schools in the district that have high FCI and how we should start attending to those through our capital planning and the ministry's major capital project funding. When we look at FCI under 50%, we start to see schools that are in better condition. And sometimes they tend to be in the best condition when they're the newest schools. And so once Cedar Hill Middle School is opened, it will have the lowest FCI of our schools, and Vic High should have a much lower FCI than it does now when it opens as the upgraded building. But here you can start to see above 50 or below 50% and the sliding scale in terms of condition. So we just wanted to let you know some of the pressures that we feel around our Facility Condition Index and where Lansdowne North, or the main campus, sits, and where Lansdowne South, Richmond Elementary, former Richmond, sits in terms of that building condition in School District 61. So at 37 and 36%, we can see that they are in the average to low poor range. And just another visual representation of the building condition from our least best building condition up here in Cedar Hill Middle School down to our newest school, which is Oak Bay, and we'll have the best condition. And hopefully we'll see this move down to underneath Oak Bay as our highest or our best condition building in the district once it's built. So what are the next steps in our consultation? Well, we wanted to provide you with some information tonight around what the proposal is, what the pressures were that we were feeling in our capital planning horizon. And we wanted to give you next steps, which is once we've concluded our public consultation, the board will give consideration to disposal through 3 readings of a bylaw or not. That's up to the board. Each bylaw reading is separate. And so there are 3 opportunities for the board to discuss and to pass its 3 bylaws. Application will be made to the Ministry of Education for permission to dispose. And if approved, Victoria Hospice would then commence the municipal land use process to rezone and subdivide. Capital planning would continue and projects will be identified for the coming year. So whether land disposals go ahead or not, our capital planning obligation and building those learning environments for students continues regardless of what happens in land disposal. Key dates, September 27th, the agreement was signed between the 2 parties. We're here tonight to provide an opportunity for information and consultation. We're going to have a feedback period for 3 weeks. So you've received some information tonight. We'll have some Q&A, and then you might want to go away and think about it or have further questions. And that's why we're leaving some time open for your feedback. We'll give that feedback. Oh, I've got a spelling mistake. Sorry about that. We've got feedback going back to the board on December 3rd. And then on December 13th, they'll have their land disposal bylaw debate and possibly a decision. And that is our presentation for tonight. Do you have any questions? I think Andy's going to see if he's sort of our Zoom facilitator. So I think he might call on people or read out their questions if they're in the chat.
Thank you, Kim. I'll watch for any hands going up as well.
Catherine has her hand up.
You're on mute.
You go ahead, Catherine.
Let's go to a question in the chat while we wait for Catherine to unmute. So the first question, Kim, comes from Soren. How was the $2.5 million determined?
Hey, thank you, Soren. There was an appraisal done on the 1.9 acre parcel. That appraisal was provided to the board, and the board considered that appraisal and then made its offer of 2.5 to the Hospice Society. So we can say that the 2.5 million is higher than the appraised value.
Next question comes from Frank. Can you please clarify the specific goals and objectives of this information session? How will staff and the SD61's board use this information in their decision making? Is the intention to generally engage the community or simply report that you conducted an online meeting?
I'll start, and then Lisa, you might want to chime in. The goals of tonight are to help the community understand some of the context that School District 61 works in terms of how we look at capital planning, some of our enrollment and capital cost pressures. as well as explain to the public what comprises the proposed deal so that you understand what might become of the land. Staff doesn't make any decisions at this point. We are facilitating the consultation, and we will bring any type of information that the board asks us to bring. And it's really the board's decision. So the board is kicking off its consultation process by providing this information tonight and a bit of a Q&A, and then awaiting the 3 weeks of feedback to hear from you so that they can consider all that information when it comes to those 3 readings of their bylaw. Lisa, did I miss anything?
I would just like to add that, people might want to sit with the information they've received tonight in the presentation. And so all feedback, we are asking people to email it into the email address community@sd61.bc.ca. The next question comes from Lee. What message is being given to students when in an age of climate crisis and loss of green space, the school board is disposing and selling this property, which will be forever lost? ?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question, and I think it's a balance. So when we start to look at capital planning, and that's why we do take a look at the acreage of our sites and sort of the number of students on that site. 1.9 acres is a small amount in the district's holdings. And we have to balance our capital planning priorities in terms of that climate change motion. And again, the demand of both the students and the community. We know we heard during our Vic High consultation process and throughout the year leading up to some of the bylaw readings for the district for Caledonia and Vic High. We certainly heard about why wasn't the school being built as carbon neutral? Why were we putting in heat pumps, et cetera? And why wasn't it going to be a carbon neutral building given the pressures that we're feeling there too? So I have to say, when we start to look toward building a new Cedar Hill Middle School, it's something at top of mind for staff, and I believe for the board, given their motions. And so when we look at trying to build a carbon neutral school and their added costs to do that, it is a trade-off in terms of how do we fulfill that capital obligation for climate change as well as green space. And we believe by looking at the size of our properties and the number of students attending on them, we can make some determination in that.
So I have a question by a direct message from Wendy. Who is the partner versus the open market?
Sorry, what's the question?
The question is, who is the partner versus the open market?
Oh, so the open market, what we would say is that's sort of putting up a for sale sign on the property and inviting anybody to make a bid, I guess. And the partner here is Victoria Hospice. So when the Victoria Hospice approached us, we asked the board, do you want to consider this proposal? And when you go forward in consultation, do you want to go forward saying that you have a partner? Or would you like to just put it on the open market? And because a partner came forward, the board decided that they would like to come forward to the public, indicating that they had a partner for this particular proposal.
The next question is from Catherine. Thank you so much, Catherine. Is Lansdowne Junior a permanent designation of former Richmond School?
Sorry, can you read that one again?
Is Lansdowne a permanent designation of the former Richmond School?
If you're talking about a school facility, the ministry is aware that we have 2 campuses and that we are using the former Richmond Elementary School as a middle school. As our second campus. When we submit our data and our 1701 data for funding, our student data, as well as when we do our capital planning, Lansdowne Middle School is one facility. And the ministry understands that we have 2 campuses. Now, let's say for some strange reason, we know Richmond Elementary was an elementary school. It was closed for a time. And we know because of increasing enrollment at Lansdowne Middle that we wanted to take advantage of that space and make a second campus. And let's just say 20 years down the road, Lansdowne Middle School decreases by 250 students and elementary school age students in the neighborhood increase by 250. The board can make the decision to change the purpose of the school back to an elementary. And these are the ebbs and flows in our enrollment and the pressures that we feel and some of the decisions made through boundary review in terms of all that data and all that feedback we received from you and the public. So it's permanently designated right now, but given enrollment changes over time, it's the board's decision to make use of the space it has for the best optimum opportunities for students.
Next question comes from Lee. Why does the school board have to sell land to make up for budget deficiencies that are largely related to earthquake proofing, an unavoidable natural driven capital expense that should come out of the Ministry of Finance general funds or through borrowing? ?
Yeah, that's a common question. And I think that's sometimes some of the board's advocacy. When we look at a large capital project, I think the bridging of the cost between the most expensive to the suggested option given by the ministry. So for example, Cedar Hill, the ministry said we could upgrade it for $3.6 million less. But if you want a new school, you're going to have to contribute. And this has been a trend for probably 5 to 10 years now, if not more. And so we would love it if the ministry would fund 100% of whichever option we chose. They're not doing that. And so I think, that's a discussion the board could have in terms of its advocacy or choose the cheaper option. I also think it's more than just the major capital builds. When we look at that deferred maintenance and we talk about replacing boilers or making solar panels on schools or some of the other major capital upgrades like windows and flooring and some of those learning environments that we want to improve. Those are some big dollar items. They're bigger than replacing our schools. And so we need to be mindful of the day-to-day maintenance that we need to do on our schools and the small amount of funding that we get for minor maintenance every year from the ministry. That's a good question. And we'd love it if the ministry paid 100% of any option we chose. That would be ideal.
Next question comes from Catherine. What are the numbers for growth in the feeder schools at the elementary level?
So we didn't break it down by that, but we can see in the family of schools, the feeder schools, that overall in the family, that the enrollment is predicted to remain steady and over time decrease. But we can get that information for you if you like.
Thanks, Kim. Next question comes from Frank. Can you please confirm the boundary of the proposed subdivision? Is the center line of the creek, west or east bank of the creek, edge of development permit area other? Looking to confirm the boundary.
I don't know if anybody has any more detail than the drawing. Chuck, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
At this time, I don't have that in front of me, but we can certainly get it and get back to the questioner.
Next question comes from Lisa. Prior to September 27th partnership agreement with Victoria Hospice Society, was there discussion with Saanich regarding planning?
So we did not discuss planning with Saanich. Really the onus, if the board gives 3 readings of the bylaw, that triggers, and the ministry approves, that triggers us to remove the subjects in our side of the agreement. And then Victoria Hospice would need to go forward to the District of Saanich and meet all of their subdivision and municipal obligations. And I don't know if the chair or the CEO would like to comment on that, if they've had any conversation with Saanich.
Hi, excuse me, this is Kevin Harder. we had a meeting with Saanich quite a while ago just to let them know we were interested in doing something within the district. And then we have had some meetings since the agreement has been signed to discuss the conditions around.
Great. Thank you, Kevin.
Next question comes from Robbie. A master drainage plan for the Boker Creek watershed was completed in 2007 for the CRD and its members, Saanich, Oak Bay, and Victoria. The report included the results of detailed flood modeling. The land is in a wetland and flooding area. How has this been factored into your decision to sell?
So again, the district is holding the property. We've had a partner come forward and ask to purchase it. And again, in order for them to fulfill their end of the deal, they'll have to go through the municipal rules and regulations. And I believe there are other ministries in charge of creeks and lands. And I know that in my conversations with Vic Hospice, they have been researching that and are well aware of that.
The next question was similar and you answered it, Kim. So the next question comes from Tyler. With the access of the bridge will the access of the bridge over the creek be retained? It is a very well-used amenity of the area. Oh, it is the only crossing that is not on the road.
Yes, I believe I asked this question as well. And in the planning, we hope to maintain that bridge as far as I know. Kevin, did you have any comment on that one?
Right now, we do not have any plan to remove the bridge. Obviously, there'll be a discussion with Saanich to make sure that they're okay with what the final plans are for the creek.
But I think that's good feedback for the board.
Next question, how and when does SD 61 consult with foreign First Nations in the disposal of land?
Sure. Lisa, did you want to speak to, since it's about consultation, to speak to that? I know you've been working hard to communicate.
Yeah, so we did reach out to the four houses, so the Songhees, the Esquimalt, and the Métis and the Urban People's House Indigenous Advisory to invite them to this meeting this evening. We also have a protocol within the district that we have been asked to follow by the four houses. So our Administrator of Indigenous Education has standing meetings with the four houses. And so this is a topic of discussion that will be coming to the table. And then we will engage with the nations to ask how they would like to proceed with consultation so they can guide us through the process. Anything else you want to add to that, Kim?
No, I think that's great. Thank you, Lisa.
The next question comes from Frank. Has SD 61 previously entertained selling all or part of the Richmond School property?
I've been here for 2 years and it's not been part of a discussion that I've been part of. I don't know if Chair Whitaker remembers any point in time where that was a discussion, but not to my knowledge.
Not in my recollection. So yeah, no, I'm sorry. It could be before that, but not in the last 10 or 15 years.
We have some more questions about the creek. This one comes from Pat. What happened to the agreement the municipality and school board had with the Friends of Boker Creek for the development and preservation of the creek?
I'm not aware of that agreement, but again, it may be in our files here. Again, I would say that right now the board is considering the disposal of this property and it's incumbent on the purchaser to go through the municipal and legislative requirements in order to make the property work for them. And if it doesn't, then the deal won't go forward.
And this is a 3-question question, but you answered the first one, but the second half, would you consider including restoration of the creek as a requirement of this deal?
That is not currently written into the purchase and sale agreement as a condition for School District 61. But if the subdivision And the purpose of the new build or the plans for Vic Hospice were to be approved by Saanich. I know that there are requirements that Saanich has, as well as other ministries in terms of creek preservation and setbacks. So I don't know, Kevin, if you wanted to mention anything about that, but that would be my understanding.
That is correct. And it is our plan currently to be able to hire a biologist, a landscape architect, and work closely with the CRD, Saanich, and the community, Friends of Boker Creek, and the area around there in order to determine what would be a good structure or remediation of the creek in order to bring a natural environment back for the community as well as our staff and clients.
All right, so our next question is, why have you chosen options that aren't covered by the province?
Yeah, I think that's a question that trustees who are here tonight are listening to, and I would encourage you to provide that feedback as well. For me, from a staff perspective, and I don't speak for the board makes its decisions. But again, I'll just point out that business case where we look at a school condition of FCI of 76%, where the deferred maintenance or the cost to upgrade the existing structure is nearly as much as to replace it. And when we look at a $45 million investment, is 3.5 a reasonable amount for the board to contribute to a brand new school with current learning environments, outdoor spaces, some of the amenities that we see, new libraries, building efficiency, carbon neutrality, et cetera. So really it's a decision about what kind of learning environments do we want to provide to students, and where can we leverage partner funding, ministry funding, et cetera, in terms of creating those modern environments that will stand for the next 60 to 100 years for future students, as well as today's students.
So we have a few comments. I'm just scrolling to find the next question. Next one comes from Ian. As a public agency, can you please speak to some of the basic community planning considerations considered with the property, Shelbourne local area plan, OCP, Boker Creek blueprint, watershed, etc.?
Yeah, and so again, I think I said it a few times tonight, so I'm going to sound like a broken record, sorry. We're here to talk about this 1.9 acre land disposal. And I think when questions like this come up, there's concern around some of the environmental elements and some of the community planning that's occurred, and that's really important. But again, it's the future purpose of the land. And the buyer will attend to that through Saanich and some of the other ministries as it continues with its planning. And as we said, if it fails at any of those levels, then the deal just backs out.
Next question is asking what the contingency plan is to have in place for the seller and buyer if there is ever flooding upstream or downstream.
So I think Kevin's spoken to that in terms of a biologist and a landscape architect and working with the CRD, Saanich, and the Friends of Boker Creek in terms of those aspects of the environment as they move forward with their planned purpose for the property.
Next question, the proposed hospice facility would be constructed at the end of a narrow cul-de-sac in an area prone to flooding. In case of an emergency or in any emergency, how can this be a good location?
And Kevin, I don't know if you want to speak to why you were interested in that particular parcel, given some of its history. I don't know.
Obviously, there'll be consultants to provide us with information on it, but the parcel was what we were looking for, and it's very close to the hospital, which is an essential part of being able to ensure that we can support the clients we serve. So good location, good size.
Scrolling through some of the comments. If hospice could not get a suitable rezoning/agreement with oh, my screen's jumping, sorry. If hospice could not get a suitable rezoning agreement with Saanich, could hospice then sell it on the open market?
A consideration in the purchase and sale agreement is around subdivision. And so I think there are some particulars in the agreement that would attend to that. Kevin, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
No, the only thing I can say is that we will be making applications either closely or together for the subdivision and with our plans for rezoning.
This is a comment and a question. So the school board is a signer of the Boker Creek Initiative 100-year plan. This is the agreement to which Pat may be referring to. How are we unaware of this agreement?
Well, as I said, I've been here for 2 years, and so you brought that to our attention, and we will take that away and have a look at it. Thank you for bringing it forward.
And there's a few questions left. About community planning consideration, is that information then off the table for the boards? This is a second half to your question. I'm sorry, Ian, can you retype your question? Because I have a bunch of questions on my screen and I only seem to have the second half of the question. Apologies.
Or could he read it out?
I could.
Thank you, Ian. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I guess what I'm just asking is regarding my previous question about the community planning considerations. You know, you kind of a number of times said that that's not really in your purview, and you're expecting the Saanich's rezoning process or whatever to deal with that. So I guess my follow-up question is that information then off the basic information around local planning, community planning considerations, is that information then off the table for the board's consideration? Isn't that something as a public agency that you would have a duty of due diligence to consider, or is it off the table?
I don't think anything's off the table. I think what we're really here to do tonight is to share the information. And I think all of the questions that you're asking and all the feedback you'll send over the next 3 weeks is really important for trustees to hear. And I know that they are listening, and the engagement report that we provide with all the feedback will be at the forefront of each trustee's mind as it sets out on its deliberations around a bylaw reading. And we can try to fulfill or fill out or expand on our answer for that and post it on the website if you'd like.
Yeah, thanks. You do come across though as you avoiding providing any of that sort of basic information, which I think is really important for many of the residents. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for that. I'll take that under advisement.
I see Roger Young has his hand up. Go ahead, Roger.
Sure. Can you hear me? Good. I'm here, full disclosure, I live right across the street, but more so representing an outgoing VP for Carnarvon Baseball. And I know this is not the school board's concern at all, but we have to send our 9-year-olds up to Maynard Park up by Caddy Bay, our girls sometimes up to Gordon Head to play. We're always interested in finding green space for our kids to find ball fields, and we go all over the city just to try and get our kids playing. Meanwhile, we find at our North Jubilee Community Association a few weeks ago that our local councillor that represented there had found out about this sale in the news as well. And I know there's this struggle when, you know, one side of Newton Street is Victoria and one side Saanich, and for all the municipalities, and obviously I'm representing a lot of Oak Bay families as well, for everybody to communicate. But it would just seem that with the loss of green space left and right, and the densification plans that Victoria has for right south all around the hospital, that some communication with the municipalities would really be in order. And it just seems that the timeline, like that December 3rd, is really soon. I'm completely sympathetic to the needs and the profound need for the Hospice Association and to create a state-of-the-art facility. I'm just advocating for green space and for our kids and for the municipalities to work with the school district, because it would seem, both my kids are in SD61. One of my kids is at Lansdowne. I want the school district to get the money. I think it makes sense to sell it because it's not being used, by the school. But it would seem that some collective action by Saanich and by the Saanich and Victoria, that maybe there could be some sort of collective action to preserve it as green space, and also consider some of the floodplain issues that we certainly have suffered from in our basement as well. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa, I see you have your hand up. You can go next.
Yeah, I just had in the chat. I hope, can you hear me? Sorry, one second. Can you hear me? Okay, good. I just put in the chat, just, again, for the enrollment and the projected enrollment numbers. I guess those are in the public domain, so we can review those. That's correct?
Yes, I think in the previous answer, I said we could find that data and we'll post it to the website. This PowerPoint, and I believe the live stream will be posted to the website, so you can watch it again or watch it afterwards. And if we have supplemental information to post, got a couple of action items here. We'll post those to the website too as follow-up information.
Okay, and I wanted to just comment on that. I think it's important, right? Because we've seen in the past where the enrollment hasn't necessarily been accurate, and then we've seen a need for the Richmond School to reopen, to again be there for student body that's increasing. And then all these residents have said there's a lot of densification that's coming to the Shelburne Valley corridor. And so I really wonder about some of I have some questions around the projections. So
sure.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm going to go back to chat. Frank has a comment and a question. SD61 closed Richmond Elementary School in the early 2000s and put the entire school property on the real estate market in January 2007, citing it was surplus to projected needs. There was extensive community interest raised at that time. Did you consider this information in designing your current public engagement process?
No, we did not.
Next question. Is the building opposite the hospital, former CNIB, which is currently vacant, not suitable for their purposes?
Kevin, did you have a look at that particular building or site in terms of an option?
No, we haven't looked at that particular site. However, we do know that we would like to build something that is purpose-built to new programs in order to support current and future needs of our community.
Thank you.
Sasha asks, can we do a follow-up meeting where all trustees are present?
That's up to the board and their consultation plan.
Next question is about climate change.
Sorry, I have a follow-up actually. The consultation plan, which is what exactly? Can you be more?
The presentation tonight and the feedback period, and then the information to the board for a 10-day period, and for them to consider at 1 or 2 or 3 meetings their disposal bylaw if it receives first, second, and third reading.
So the consultation part with the community is just this meeting and a 3-week
so I would
time frame.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just want to add some context to that question, Sasha. So over 500 letters were distributed to neighbors within the community, and letters were sent to nearby property managers and apartments, condos, and stratas. We also reached out to the local community associations, the community colleges, the 4 houses, as we speak to earlier, the Lansdowne School, and all the feeder schools that feed into Lansdowne. We sent an update to the District of Saanich, and other communication awareness efforts included web content on our district website, social media, paper ads, and signage on site. So the communication awareness efforts was part 1. This is phase 1 of getting everyone here tonight to have this discussion. The next phase is we are asking people to submit their feedback via community@sd61.bc.ca. All input will be compiled, will be responding, and it will be brought forward to the board for them to make a determination of how they would like to proceed at a later date.
And I would say also, just to add, if the project were to advance past the 3 readings of the board's bylaw, any of Victoria Hospice's efforts in terms of subdivision or rezoning would require consultation as well with the public.
Great, thank you.
Next question is regarding climate change. Climate change features prominently in your news release. Has SD61 considered how stewardship and retention of public green space contributes to the climate change mitigation and adaptation?
Yeah, I think that is one of the tough things that the trustees and the board as a whole has to consider. And we talked about some of those trade-offs in terms of how do we fund some of the carbon neutrality or reduce our greenhouse gas footprint in terms of our buildings, which we know are our biggest part of our footprint. How do we trade that off in terms of funding some of those projects with some of the green space stewardship creek type of items that you're talking about? And that is something that the board does need to consider as it does any capital planning with any of its land.
Another question goes back to the Boker Creek blueprint. One of the blueprint principles is to purchase and protect key land in the watershed. The question is, did the district approach Saanich to buy the land? If not, why?
We did not approach the district to buy the land. We are discussing tonight a disposal of land that is in the board's title already. And so that's what we're discussing here. And again, as we move forward through the deal and the other types of consultation and approvals that have to happen, and some of the, we've heard loud and clear tonight, I think that Boker Creek and green space and that the other side of the environmental equation is extremely important to this group. And so I know the board will be considering that, and I encourage you to continue to provide that feedback to the board in addition to this meeting so that they get the full picture from you.
There's a question here from Robbie, and I know I've read a couple of your questions, so may you please turn on your microphone, because you ask why your questions are being skipped over and not answered, and I'm reading them as they come up on my screen, so I'm sorry if one has been missed. Can you please communicate with your microphone?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. No, there was, they're way back. One was at 7:16 p.m. and the next one was at 7:24 p.m.
Do you mind just asking the question here on the live?
Well, the first one was, considering the flooding possibilities upstream and downstream, if the wetland importance of the property is not addressed and protected, what contingency plans do the seller and buyer have in place to cover their liability and for damages in the case of property flooding upstream and downstream from the pursuant to what happens after this?
Right. So whoever owns the land has the liability. And so right now, School District 61 has liability. And if the deal were to go through Victoria Hospice, working with Saanich, CRD, Friends of Boker Creek, the biologist and the landscape architect would determine the liability on the parcel that's considering being disposed. And between the two parcels, if it were to be subdivided, we would both share liability and that responsibility for the creek. And so we would, as we do now, take into account in our planning all of the types of land that we have and the types of buildings we have. So the creek is the creek. It's been there forever. And if the subdivision goes through, then we would share that creek and we would both attend to it as necessary. And I think that Kevin Harder from Victoria Hospice has given us a good indication of the work that they're willing to do and ready to do in order to pursue this subdivision if this disposal goes forward or not.
Okay, so that covers liability, which is interesting to see here. You agree that you are liable. The second question I had was sort of broader than just the flooding issue, but the quality of the water. So how do the parties to this agreement intend to work to improve the ecological values of the property and Boker Creek? Are the buyer and seller aware of the ecological enhancements that have been made downstream to the point now that chum salmon eggs will be introduced in February of 2022 near Monteith Street in Oak Bay?
I think that Kevin Harder has spoken to that one quite nicely in terms of the partners and the expertise they're going to bring in terms of pursuing this subdivision. And again, working with Saanich CRD, a biologist, landscape architect, and the Friends of Boker Creek. So I think that will all come to light as the work gets going on the Friends of Boker Creek portion of that. Kevin, did you want to add anything to that?
No, you've covered it quite right. This is the creek is very important to us, and we want to ensure that it is treated appropriately in this project. So we will be hiring the necessary consultants to provide us with the information we need in order to ensure that happens.
Does that answer your questions, Robbie?
Okay, for now. We'll send you along the Boker Creek Initiative Plan for the board and the director to get caught up on.
Thank you.
Next question comes from Lisa. Is SD 61 aware that school property and land is factored into Saanich Parks and that this community is currently well below green space recommendations by Saanich standards?
Yes, we are aware of that plan. And again, we're counting on Saanich to let us know if this proposal is a good one or not in terms of their OCP, their planning, et cetera. So we are aware of it. And I think it's great that the board be aware of it too.
Thanks. Okay.
Next question, has the projected new Canadian immigration stats of approximately 4 million new immigrants within the next 2 years been factored into your projected enrollment figures?
We believe so. We used 2 consultants to help us determine our enrollment projections. And we do our enrollment projections in December of each year. And they are just projections. And so when we're looking at a 20, 30, 40-year period, we know that we can't be 100% accurate, even 5 years down the line, but we do our best. And that's why we review it with 2 separate independent consultants each year. One is more of a long-term basis and one is more of a short-term basis with local knowledge. And I don't know, Interim Deputy Superintendent Colin Roberts, if you would like to comment on enrollment projections and the methodology used for our projections.
The third parties that we rely upon for our projections do try and take into account both historical and predicted future immigration patterns, both within the nation, within the province, and internationally. And they do draw upon various sources of data, including StatsCan data as well. So in recent years, they've proved to be very accurate with their projections, and we're optimistic for those kind of mid-range 10 to 15 years that we can rely upon those with reasonable confidence.
Next question comes from Frank again. Consultation is not simply info sharing. It involves meaningful dialogue, particularly when public agencies are involved. When will you be having dialogue with community groups, residents, and other stakeholders?
Per the board's approved consultation plan, and as communications manager McVale has explained, we're in phase 1 tonight. Phase 2 will move into some of the information that you want to send us, and that will be compiled. And if the board wants to go out again or change its course in terms of its consultation plan, it can do so. But I think we've set out the plan as it sits now in terms of consultation for this particular disposal.
Another question from Soren. Did the SD61 climate emergency motion include flood relief and stormwater management for climate adaptation?
That motion was passed before I was here. I don't know if any of the trustees want to comment on that. If Chair Whitaker would like to make any comment.
It was a very broad motion, and I'm sure that is part of what was intended, or so it wasn't specific.
But I think what we've heard tonight is that it is a concern, and it is something that you want to highlight for us. So we will take that away and follow up.
I see a gentleman putting his hand up, titled Susan Roberts. Feel free to ask. Feel free to go ahead.
I think you're muted. Sorry.
Mute?
There.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful, okay. I just want to get an idea of what we're talking about. What kind of a footprint are we talking about? What is the mass of that building? You must have some idea how many people are going to be in it. I don't know what kind of an animal we're talking about. You must have some idea of what you're intending to put on the site. Because obviously people are concerned whether we're going to be overwhelmed, we're going to be concerned whether it's even, the wrong thing in the right place, or I don't know. But what's the shape of this animal?
Yeah.
What's it going to look like?
And I'd invite.
Look like, how dense it is going to, how dense, how big?
Sure. So I'd invite Victoria Hospice to comment on that, if they can provide any information.
It's still early days to be able to determine exactly what the entire footprint will look like. We're in discussions with our partners, Island Health, to determine some of the aspects of future needs and to determine if this is the appropriate place to be adding some of those programs to. But, right now, it's anything I'd be telling you would be just more of a wild guess, as we have a lot more structure design to go through to determine exactly what we are doing in the end with this property.
Yeah. Surely you must know what the need is. I mean, there's function and there's form. So what are your functional needs? I mean, you must have an idea that there's a requirement for how many people that you're going to be trying to put on that site.
We don't know exactly how many people we're putting on the site. We know that at the end of the day, we probably have a requirement for roughly 15,000 square feet for community programs. And then it'll depend upon what other aspects we add to it from there.
Okay.
It's really hard to provide us. I know it's something everybody wants to know, but it's hard to provide in the planning stage, right?
Mm-hmm. Our next question comes from Pat. Did we not just sell a large acreage of green space in our neighborhood at Lansdowne North?
We did sell 7.3 acres of a 25-acre site at Lansdowne North to another public school district, the Francophone School District number 93. And that deal is pending Saanich subdivision and consultation and rezoning, or not rezoning, but subdivision as well.
The next question is specifically for Kevin Harder. Has Hospice considered leasing or buying other sites to deliver regional services such as the CNIB building currently for sale at the corner of Richmond and Bay, close to the Royal Jubilee Hospital, where Hospice currently delivers services?
We have not considered the CNIB building, as we had mentioned before. There are a number of items that we require for the development of a new building overall, and I'm not even positive what the square footage of that building is. You know, recognizing that there would be no way to likely have options to expand to our full suite of services, should that be the decision at the end of the day. And we have been searching for land for a number of years now, and have found it very challenging to find a parcel of land that has the right size and is in a good location that we can support those that we serve from.
The next question comes from Catherine. I believe we answered this already, but I don't want to miss anyone's question. Are you aware that the city also factors this green space into the underserved for green space North Jubilee neighborhood as well as Saanich? Why are you considering discussions with Friends of Boker and not the community associations also on its borders? For example, Camosun Community Association.
And so Lisa, from the school district's perspective, could you just, would that be an organization that we reached out to in terms of advising them of this meeting tonight?
We did. We reached out to the Camosun Community Association.
Okay. And then Kevin, I'm not sure if you have any comment from Vic Hospice's perspective.
Well, there'll be a community consultation, which is part of rezoning, I believe, overall, and we'll be reaching out to all the community associations and stakeholders in that area.
But that doesn't preclude any concerns or any feedback coming forward to the board in terms of their decision as well.
Next question from Peter. SD 61's capital requirements are $248 million. The hospice initiative is just a small percentage of your needs. What other initiatives to raise capital do you have? Are there other land sales anticipated? Would it not be appropriate to have a broader dialogue with the community on this dilemma?
Mm-hmm. So we know we've netted out a small portion of land at Vic High in terms of a disposal, some land at SJ Burnside, some at Lansdowne North, which is our largest piece of property in terms of a middle school and continues to be even after the disposal to CSF. And this particular small portion as well. And so when we look at land disposal, we're really looking at land that is not being used by the school community in terms of meeting our educational needs, recognizing that we have many community partners, and that's why we do come out to the public around our policy disposal, as well as the ministry's approval checklist in terms of telling the public, hey, here's what we're thinking about doing and give us your thoughts. And so we do try to take a look when somebody approaches us about land, whether or not that land is needed for future enrollment or if it's currently being used for school programming. And we tend to go off that. The district does have a 2017 long-range facilities plan that we are planning to update. COVID kind of threw a wrench in that, but we know we want to review that and to check in with that 2017 information and update it and make sure that we're aware of all the capital pressures we have and all of the land that we currently own, to take a look at that. And so when we look at a small piece like Victoria Hospice at 2.5 million, it doesn't seem like a lot, but when you look at the ministry asking us for 3.6 million in order to create a better option or a better learning environment for students, 2.5 is probably the bridge to fund that difference on a smaller school. So it seems small in terms of the bigger picture, in terms of 248 million, but if we're moving building by building, it can make quite an impact on a single school, in my opinion.
The next question is for Vic Hospice. Hospice was proposing to develop next to VGH and View Royal several years ago. What happened to that? Question mark.
I wasn't here at the time that was being considered, but it's my understanding that after getting through all the design and discussion around what would be needed and how it would look, both Island Health and Victoria Hospice determined it was not a viable project. But I am not knowledgeable on all the details of that.
This next question is about the CNIB building again for Vic Hospice. If you don't know your needs and you don't know the square footage of the building, how do you know it is not adequate for your needs?
Well, we know that CNIB would not provide us with the option should we determine that hospice end of life beds needs to be part of this project, which is an ongoing discussion with Island Health right now.
Another question from Catherine. North Jubilee is on the south side of the 1700 block of Newton. How could you not consider our input? I can answer that. We want to hear input from everybody, and it was not that we're trying to disclude. We want to be as inclusive as possible. And we're so happy that you were able to attend tonight. So any further questions or concerns you want to share, you can share with us through community@sd61.bc.ca, and we will share it with the board. Kim, do you have anything else to add?
No, thank you.
Frank has another question. Can you please clarify what specific information / considerations the board must consider in approving land disposal?
Sure. Lisa, do you have the policy handy?
I do. So we follow regulation and policy 7110, the disposal of real estate. And so as part of the land disposal process, the Greater Victoria School District must communicate the reason for sale of the property, use of the proceeds of disposal, projected enrollment in the district, the impact of district education programs, and the impact on community use of school buildings. Is there anything else, Kim, that you would like to add to that?
No, I think that and along with some of the ministry's disposal checklist, which involves consultation, fair market value, things like that, are taken into consideration by the board.
Okay, next question comes from Wendy. Since the VGH site turned out to be viable, then it sounds like hospice could buy the land, find out they cannot use for their desired plans, and then sell it on the open market. Is that correct? I'm going to read that one more time. That was the question. Is that correct? I wasn't thinking out loud. Since the VGH site turned out to be not to be viable, then it sounds like Vic Hospice could buy the land, find out they cannot use for their desired plans, and then sell it on the open market. Is that accurate? Question mark.
Part of this process will be trying to ensure that we can use it for our desired purpose. However, I would assume if we wanted to be, factual on everything, is that once we own the land, we could be able to sell it, even though that is not even part of the discussion right now.
There's a few more comments, and then we have a question here from Soren. Is SD61 able to show the independent land appraisal documentation to the public, or does that require an FOI request?
In general, it's not something that we share publicly. And so if that was required, I do believe it would require an FOI request.
And I see Susan Roberts had her hand up. Susan, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. I'm just wondering why I keep hearing that the school board is really interested in the public's thoughts on the sale of this land, but to me, it seems like it's after the fact. I'm wondering why you didn't go to the public first, the community associations, and say, look, we're thinking of selling this land. What do you, as residents and neighbors, see as your vision for this land? I'm wondering why that didn't happen first.
So I don't believe trustees were openly saying we're looking to dispose of this piece of land. We were approached by a partner, and the approved consultation plan was to come forward to the public in a transparent manner and say that we have a partner, and here's who the partner is, so that it would give you some sense of what the land might be used for. And so in terms of consulting with community groups before we even thought of selling it, we weren't, that I know of, really thinking of putting a for sale sign on it at all. We were approached, and the reason that we're here tonight is to share this information with you and for you to tell us what you think about this proposed project or this proposed deal.
Am I able to say something here? Okay, I just wanted to make a comment. It's just a casual comment. I'm walking this property that's posted, and I saw a sign, and for someone who wouldn't know, the sign basically had no mention or indication that there was a creek running through this property.
Or in the paper.
And this was also, I think you had a press release, and in no way that it even mentioned the creek. And and I find that, I don't know why I find it amusing, I find it sad actually. I mean, when something that's that apparent and that significant, a riparian property that is very unique and is downplayed, how do you explain downplaying a significant feature in our landscape, an open space that is precious, and yet you treat it as a commodity and you downplay the most important part of that property? I'm sorry, but it seems to me that there's something not clear. There's not something, frankly, true to the process. There's something missing, and I'm really disappointed.
Thank you for that. I think Kevin would like to say something, but I also would like to say, it's definitely not intentional. I think you pointed out something that we may want to consider in the future in terms of our signage or our notification. It was by no means intentional to downplay, and I don't think that was the intent or in any of our thinking to downplay the creek whatsoever. I think we've heard clearly from our partner, if the deal were to go ahead, how much work they're willing to do in terms of preserving and remediating that site. And so I don't know, Kevin, I think you had your hand up, so I don't know if you want to speak to that again.
I was just going to say that the creek has not been downplayed with us. We have spent a considerable amount of time looking at the creek and discussing it, and we're excited about the opportunity to be able to bring on a biologist and a landscape architect to create an environment that will be very beneficial to the people we serve.
I don't think, if I could just add, I am seeing a theme here, and I'm definitely hearing it loud and clear, and I think trustees are as well. And this will be, as we say, posted to the web. More members of the public can watch it and send in their feedback. The trustees that aren't here will be able to watch it to take in some of the comments and the questions. Given some of the feedback we've received already tonight, I don't think there's going to be an answer that we're going to give you to satisfy you tonight. I think you've given us lots of good information to take away and start to round out as we work toward that engagement report coming back to the board. So I know it's frustrating because we don't seem to have the answers or the answers that you're looking for, but I am hearing you, and I do have some action items written down. And so I hope to be able to follow up on some of this theme. So I thank you for that.
I have a repeated question and a comment, but I see Marilyn has put her hand up. So Marilyn, do you just want to use your microphone?
Yes, this is for Kevin. I just wanted to make it clear to you. Can you hear me, Kevin?
Yep.
Make it clear to you that Boker Creek has been studied for years and years and years. And there is a wonderful thing called the Boker Creek Blueprint, which is a CRD planning document. They have studied the biology, they have studied the plants, the invasive species, the animals. It's been done. And I think what you have to do is look, you've got to read that Boker Creek Blueprint, because it's a cooperative effort with Saanich, Victoria, and Oak Bay. Part of it is flood abatement downstream. This piece of land is very, very important for flood abatement. And I don't know if you want to build on a piece of land that's for flood abatement. So you must read that Boker Creek Blueprint. Please tell me you will, and I'll be quiet.
We have received it, and we are looking to it now to get, exactly what the plan entails and what the specifics are.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marilyn. So one more question. I'm looking at the time. We're past the 8 o'clock mark. Another question from Frank. Did anyone at SD 61 ever Google Boker Creek, bracket, thousands and thousands of hits, close bracket? So I can say from our previous consultation with Lansdowne North, we were in contact with Boker Creek, and we did reach out to Boker Creek this time around and sent them the invitation to let them know that this is happening. Kim, do you have anything else to add?
I don't. Thank you, Lisa.
Can I just add something as a trustee? Just that the Boker Creek Blueprint was presented to our board. And in fact, I believe we passed a motion in support of it. I think, if I remembered the discussion, trustees were hugely impressed with the community efforts. I didn't know about Boker Creek prior to them coming to the board. Since then, I've come to really appreciate the waterway and all of the goals around it. And so the board does have a copy of that, and we have had it since the beginning and are aware of it. So just want to make sure that you are aware that that is something that all trustees have access to and awareness of.
Thank you, Jordan. I think we're at 8:05 and
There's
okay.
one last question from Peter, and this will be our final question for this evening.
Yes, thank you. I wrote to the school board as part of the Lansdowne discussion and brought your attention to the flood prospect in the Boker Creek watershed. CRD has published in 2017 increased flooding prospects for this watershed. This is all in the daylighting feasibility study and in the 2017 report from the CRD. I brought that to your attention and a number of other factors, but I never heard back from from School District 61. There was no response. And I'm just hoping that there will be a better response from this initiative. Thank you.
Okay, I think that wraps up the question period of the evening.
I have one more question.
Oh. Lisa, will this be our last question?
I've been saying that for 5 minutes. This will be our last question.
Yeah, Ian Graham, and we've heard a lot of kind of concerns and ideas and interests around Boker Creek, and it is one of the few unculverted sections in Saanich, and where public land is on both sides of the creek. And you do seem to be fast tracking this. And so my question to you, and it's a sincere question, right? Is, are you prepared, to make a commitment tonight to extend this November 24th deadline, and actually have some meaningful dialogue with some of the community associations, the Boker Creek Initiative, the Friends of Boker Creek, so that people actually get a chance to communicate their interests and there's a dialogue. You know, it's not just a Q&A session. You know, I think that would provide a lot more, you know, wholesome and useful information to hospice, make the community more comfortable, you know, be less adversarial. And so I think the chair is on the call here. I'd like to hear a commitment to that you get off this fast track and extend the deadline. And I really appreciate, you know, the hospice, they do fabulous work, and there's a priority there to get this moving. But I think that extending this is going to, you know, actually save everybody some time by investing in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. As you know, the board will have to make that decision, but I do encourage everyone to provide input over the next 3 weeks. When that information comes forward to the board, they will have the opportunity to decide if they want to extend the process at that time. But please do take the opportunities you have now. And of course, you know, you can make that suggestion again at that time to the board. But it would have to be a vote of all 9 trustees. There's just not enough trustees in this room at this time.
Okay, I want to thank everybody for their time this evening. Victoria Hospice, it's been great to have you here to answer questions. It's so nice that you could be here. And to trustees, and of course, to all of you, it's great to hear from everybody. And I think we've definitely seen some themes. And I have, as I say, written down quite a few action items. And so we hope to round out some of the information that we've provided tonight. And so I wish you a good night and encourage your feedback. And please check out the website for further information. Good night. Thank you.